Right, I was giving you a tutorial the other day about the movement, muscles around here, muscles of the hand and stuff, and I thought of the thumb, and I've had another student recently who's actually injured one of the muscles that moves the thumb, and I think I've done a video about the muscles of the thenar eminence here, and I've done a video about muscles of the forearm. I don't know if I've ever pulled it all together because the thumb's quite special. So we are going to look at the muscles of the thumb. So what we need to do is we need to look very briefly at the bones that are involved, the muscles attached to, because those are the things that the muscles are going to move. And we will talk about the movements of the thumb, because the movements of the thumb are crucial to naming the muscles, identifying the muscles, understanding what the muscles do, and also understanding thumb function. And then we'll throw in a sprinkle of innervation so that you can better understand the functional deficits, the things that don't work when a nerve has been injured. All right? Because there's muscles in different places that are innervated by different nerves. That's the plan. Okay then, right, my other models are right hands, so we should stick to the right hand. The thumb is a little bit... So the fingers, right? The fingers have got 3 phalanges. The thumb has only got 2. So it's got 2 phalanges, each one is a phalanx, and then this bone here is a metacarpal bone. These are the metacarpal bones of the fingers. So when if I talk about the movement of the metacarpophalangeal joint, I'm talking about this joint here. In terms of the carpal bones, the bones of the wrist, at the base of the thumb is the trapezium, and then between the trapezium and this bone here, this is the scaphoid bone. Most students know about the scaphoid bone because it's the most commonly fractured bone in the wrist. So trapezium and scaphoid, and then next to trapezium we have trapezoid next to it, and then the big bone in the center of the carpal bones in this row is capitate. It's like a big head, right? I always think of like an Easter Island head. The capitate bone, and this is lunate. We're not going to talk about all of them, but those bones there are bones that the muscles of the thumb are going to attach to. Now, if we talk about intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of the thumb, intrinsic means that they are within the hand. They're in here. So intrinsic muscles of the thumb are here. This is the thenar eminence, and there's another muscle there. The extrinsic muscles of the hand and the thumb are in the forearm. This gives us more room to make a bigger muscle that can exert more force, more power, more strength through a tendon. So that gives us much greater strength in our grip than if we were to just use these little diddy muscles in here. So the little diddy muscles in the hand then are really important in fine movement and dexterity. And if we're talking about the thumb, this is what the thumb is about largely. The thumb is absolutely crucial in almost every grip that we do. So the muscles we're going to talk about are really important to normal thumb function, and you won't notice how important normal thumb function is until you lose a part of it. So the other bones that are important then are on the thumb side we have the radius. So this is where the radial pulse would be found here, right? So we've got the radius and the ulna. So those are the bones that we're talking about. Next, movements. The movements of the thumb, the names of the movements are difficult. I get surgeons coming up to me and asking me, so not hand surgeons know this really, really well. I mean, surgeons from other part of the body who you think would have a really good knowledge of anatomy ask me about the movements of the thumb. Okay, so the fingers, right? The fingers are the easy bit. This is flexion of the fingers, and this is extension of the fingers. Flexion, extension. So what we're doing there is we're flexing the metacarpophalangeal joint and we're flexing the interphalangeal joints and extending. And then the fingers, we can abduct and we can adduct. That's where you start from. Then you remember that the thumb is on a plane at 90 degrees to the fingers. It's out here, right? So the thumb is on a plane at 90 degrees to the fingers. So that means that if the thumb moves that way, that is flexion of the thumb. And again, we're flexing the metacarpophalangeal joint and this interphalangeal joint here. So that's flexion. Flexion of the fingers, flexion of the thumb, right? So if that's flexion, then that means that the opposite movement on the same plane, that is extension. Got it? So that is extension of the thumb. Flexion, extension. Okay. So we're still on that plane at 90 degrees to the fingers. So if that's extension and flexion, if we move the thumb, this one's a little difficult to demonstrate in 2D, but if we move the thumb that away, that is abduction. So what I've done there is that. That's abduction. If you do this yourself, now to prove that you've abducted the thumb, this web of skin here, this web space, that becomes full, that appears, right? That is abduction of the thumb. So if you extend the thumb, that's not fully stretched out there, right? If you fully stretch out that web space of skin, that's abduction of the thumb. And now we've abducted the thumb, we can adduct the thumb. Abduction, adduction. Abduction, adduction. Okay? You can see why it's difficult. Now, the names of the muscles are named for the movements that they cause, which is why these movements and understanding these movements is the first step in this and is important. For example, when we abduct the thumb, this web space that appears here, the muscle in there is called adductor pollicis, the adductor of the thumb. So that muscle is now long. If we make that muscle shorter, it adducts the thumb. And we'll see more examples of that as we go. Now the thumb is also special in that it can oppose the other fingers. So this movement of the thumb and the little finger is opposition. And then the reverse movement is reposition. Reposition, reposition. So opposition and reposition. Opposition, reposition. And what's happening here is we've got flexion going on, and we also have a little bit of rotation of that metacarp. See how the palm of the hand is cupping? You can do this yourself, flexion versus, all right? And now, for bonus points, which probably doesn't have much to do with what we're talking about today, but there is another movement. If you put your hand like flat on a surface, then you lift the thumb away from the surface. See what I'm doing there? That is called retropulsion. That's kind of high level stuff. That's not so useful today. But if you hear of retropulsion, you wondered what it meant. That's it there. Can you see how that's not extension, because that would be extension. It's not flexion. It's not abduction. It's not adduction. It's that funky movement there. It's lifting it off the flat surface. That's retropulsion. And we can see lots of tendons popping up on the back there. So the movements are cluing us into what muscles are doing the movements. Right. Ow, makes your hand hurt, that. Muscles. Okay, so I think we should look at the thenar eminence first. So if you look at your hand, at the base of your thumb rather, there's a nice rounded muscular mass that moves, gets thicker, gets more, gets tougher as you move your thumb around. So the muscles in there are moving the thumb. Right hand, right hand. So this is what we're looking at here. Right, okay. So there are actually a lot of little muscles here. And there's a couple of layers of muscle there. I can take a muscle off, right? So what we've got here, so there are 4 intrinsic muscles that move the thumb in the hand and 4 extrinsic muscles that move the thumb that are in the forearm. So this muscle here is running from here to here. So it's out there. So if that muscle contracts, what movement do you think that's going to cause? It's going to cause that movement, isn't it, right? So that movement there is abduction of the thumb. And I happen to know that of the muscles that abduct the thumb, there is a long version and a short version. And I also happen to know that the name for the thumb is the pollex. So anything pollicis or pollicis, depending upon how you want to pronounce your C's, refers to the thumb. So this muscle here that is abducting the thumb is abductor pollicis brevis, because there's a long one further away. Now, the second muscle here, so these are 2 separate little muscles. This muscle here, so it's in here. If this muscle contracts, how do you think it's going to move the thumb? It's going to shorten on this side, so it's going to pull the thumb that away, and that is flexion of the thumb. And again, I happen to know that there is a short version and a long version of muscles that cause flexion of the thumb. So this muscle is called flexor pollicis brevis, the short flexor of the thumb. All right. Now, if we take these muscles off and we look at this muscle here, which is deep to that, I don't know if you can see, but these fibers are kind of wrapping around that away. This deeper muscle is the one that's also going to help rotate the thumb. So this is opponens pollicis. There isn't a short one and a long one. There's just one opponens pollicis. So it just gets called opponens pollicis. And that is going to help with opposition by rotating, spinning these bones around here. Now, these muscles are coming from the flexor retinaculum here, which is the connective tissue tying down the tendons that are running to the fingers and that sort of thing, and also from the trapezium and the scaphoid bones that are down here. So they're starting from there, and then they're running up to the base of the proximal phalanx, or in the case of opponens pollicis, they're running around the metacarpal bone here. These muscles in the thenar eminence at the base of the thumb are innervated by the median nerve. So long-term damage to the median nerve will cause wasting of this muscle belly group here, and will of course affect movements of the thumb. Okay, median nerve, these guys. There's another muscle here, right? Let me put this muscle back on again. So that's our thenar eminence, those 3 muscles that we've just talked about. And this was the muscle that I mentioned earlier. See this here? This is that when you abduct your thumb, this full web space appears here, and there's a muscle in there. That's the muscle. And this is adductor pollicis, or adductor pollicis, whatever you like. But this is the only muscle that's going to adduct the thumb, bring it back from an abducted position. So there's no long and short, just adductor pollicis. And this is, like all of these muscles of the hand around here, it is innervated by the ulnar nerve. So that's different, right? So you can test ulnar nerve function by, testing the strength of that action. So look, these bones here are metacarpals. Metacarpal 1, 2, and 3. And adductor pollicis it's actually got 2 heads. It's got an oblique head and a transverse head, meaning it's got a couple of parts. But it comes from metacarpals 2 and 3 and runs to the medial side of the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb, which makes complete sense because it's pulling here and it pulls the thumb back to there, so you adduct the thumb, adductor pollicis, and that is the 4 intrinsic muscles of the hand. Okay? That was probably the easy bit, because now we need to look at the extrinsic muscles of the thumb down here. Let's do the easy one first. So this is the anterior compartment of the forearm. This is a flexor compartment, that is, the muscles are flexing the fingers and also the thumb, as it would turn out. So we've got one extrinsic muscle of the thumb here. Now, so I've taken off the layers of muscles that are going to move the wrist and move the fingers, although we can see here, this muscle here is flexor digitorum and profundus. This is going to move the fingers. You can see the tendons there. But you see here, all right, see where we are? So there's the radial pulse there. This lovely big muscle here, which is attached to the radius. It's attached to the interosseous membrane. There's like a membrane between the bones there, right? This is going to send a tendon up through here to, ooh, that's it there. So this is a big, strong muscle. See, I'm a big fan of this muscle because I'm a rock climber. This is, when it pulls on the thumb, it's also going to flex the thumb. This is flexor pollicis longus. This is the long muscle. There's the short muscle there. Look, see how the tendon's running around here, how it's going to have the same sort of effect as that of flexor pollicis brevis. The reason I like this one climbing is because most of the time climbing you're doing this, right? You're crimping on things, but then you get a pinch. And you can pinch something. When you're pinching something, you can now recruit flexor pollicis longus, nice big muscle. You haven't been using it. All your other muscles have been getting pretty tired. This muscle feels fresh, and you feel like you got a good hold for a minute. Until then, that muscle gets tired as well. But you move on, right? So flexor pollicis longus. This is in the anterior compartment of the forearm. The muscles here are mostly innervated by the median nerve, so flexor pollicis longus is also innervated by the median nerve, just like the muscles of the thenar eminence. Good. Now, you know the back of your hand, like the back of your hand, right? So look at the back of your hand. Oh, you can see some of those tendons already. But now, when you move the thumb around, you can see these tendons here are moving around, right? So these tendons are pulling on the thumb and causing these movements. We need to go back to our rule of remembering the movement of the thumb so that we can then work out the name of the muscle. I really struggle to remember the names of these tendons. So this is the anatomical snuff box here. It's an anatomical landmark because in there is the scaphoid bone. So if somebody fractures the scaphoid bone, and if you go poking in there and it hurts, they probably fractured the scaphoid bone. But this is the anatomical snuff box formed by the borders of these tendons. Oh, I think I've probably done a video on that as well, so I have talked about these before. Okay, the trick is there is one tendon here and there are 2 tendons here. Now look at the movements. And so I said that is extension of the thumb, right? So flexion, extension. Now when I extend the thumb, both of those tendons are sticking up proud, which means they're being pulled on. There are 2 extensor pollicis muscles here. One of them is short and one of them is long. This tendon here doesn't have far to go, so this is the tendon of extensor pollicis brevis. This tendon here is going to run around here, has much more room to move to, so it's a bigger muscle, a longer muscle. So this is the tendon of extensor pollicis longus. Yeah? Makes sense, right? So look, when you extend the thumb, both of those tendons appear. But if that's extension of the thumb, right? Extension of the thumb, extension of the thumb. That is abduction of the thumb, isn't it? So when I abduct the thumb, we can see how those tendons are moving. Only this tendon, there is another tendon here. So neither of those two extensor tendons are pulling to cause abduction of the thumb, but there is, and I can feel it, there is a tendon under tension here. So this will be abductor pollicis, and we saw an abductor pollicis brevis muscle in here. So this tendon is going to be abductor pollicis longus. That's the method. And when students challenge me, I will struggle to remember all of that and have to go and look at an illustration in a textbook. But that's all right. So extension of the thumb, those two tendons. Abduction of the thumb, only this tendon is now active. Let's have a look on the model. This is really, ow. So these are the extensor muscles and tendons of the fingers and the wrist. Can't take those off. But look, as we spin around, ooh. So we can see these tendons here running from the thumb to these two muscles here. Look, that's, yeah. So we've got these two tendons here. I said we had two tendons on this side and a single tendon on this side. That's our anatomical snuff box. So then, this tendon here is extending the thumb and it's running around here. So now it's, see the tendon runs down here, but it's deep to these muscles, so we can't see it. But that muscle is coming from the bones down here, and that is extensor pollicis longus. That's the long one, because there's more room for it. And look, can you see how this tendon is attached here, and its origin is actually, it's going all the way over here. It's going, so it's attached to the posterior parts of the ulnar bone and that interosseous membrane that runs between the two bones. Extensor pollicis longus. So then this tendon here, when I extend my thumb, we can see both of those tendons. So that's, that tendon there is this tendon here. And again, look, its insertion is into the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb. This is extensor pollicis brevis. It's already looking like a smaller muscle. It's got less room to move into. And that's going to be attached to the radius bone, which is on this side. And that interosseous membrane as well, probably. But look, we can see these two muscles are quite close together, right? This muscle here, this is running from both the ulnar and the radius posterior, on the posterior surfaces back here, and the interosseous membrane. And this muscle is sending a tendon. Now where does the tendon go? Oh, it only goes that far. So this is the base of the metacarpal bone of the thumb. So that tendon is actually only going that far, which is what explains some of the change of shapes that we see here. So down here we've actually got the two tendons, and remember, so that's extension, that's abduction, so that tendon is abducting the thumb. So that is, this tendon and muscle here are abductor pollicis longus. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the 4 extrinsic muscles of the thumb. Now these muscles are in the posterior compartment of the forearm. The nerve of the posterior compartment of the forearm is the radius nerve. So these muscles are innervated by the radius nerve. All right? What do you think? The thumb is called the pollex. The muscles that move the thumb are called something pollicis. The movements of the thumb give names to the muscles that move the thumb. There are 4 muscles intrinsic to the hand. 3 of them are in the thenar eminence and are innervated by the median nerve. 1 of them is innervated by the ulnar nerve, like the other muscles of the hand. And we have 4 extrinsic, more powerful muscles of the thumb, 1 of which is in the anterior compartment of the forearm and is innervated by the median nerve. 3 of which are in the posterior compartment of the forearm and are innervated by the radial nerve. Yes, there's a lot going on there, but the thumb is pretty important to us humans, right? It's a, you know, It's pretty important. So those muscles are also important, which means that damage to a nerve can lead to loss of function of the thumb, but which function? With that knowledge, you can work it out. Ooh, the thumb. Okay, that'll do. See you next week.